Hello and welcome to the Poorhammer Podcast, episode 25. I'm your host, Brad. This is my co-host, Eric.
How's it going?
We've got a fun episode for you guys tonight.
Today, we're doing Subfactions Grey Knight.
Yes, let's hit our topic.
Sounds good. So, I guess we can start with Swordbearers.
Yes, so we will read what you get out of these, and then we will talk about what we like with each subfaction. It does not have to be a competitive focus or anything. This is just typing up each subfaction and giving our review of each one.
So, for Grey Knights, subfactions give a strat, a psychic power, and a warlord trait. It's pretty simple.
Yes, so you don't get a passive ability or static or anything like that. You're just getting a stratagem, psychic power, and warlord trait. You don't even get relic.
No, but the psychic powers are interesting, which is what I would expect out of Grey Knights to be doing interesting psychic things, hopefully.
And Thousand Suns works the same way, where we don't get the strat, instead we get the relic.
Right. So it's not that crazy.
Yeah, it's just, this is how they do it's a Space Marine but.
Exactly.
Where, like, what would be your subfaction static ability is instead your army rule.
Yeah.
Because you're inheriting so many things from being in Space Marine power armor to begin with.
Yeah. That's true.
So I would prefer to see on these ones that don't give any static ability to do like all four of the smaller things, because I have the picture in my head of what they wanted, where like this feels very meaningful when you pick your subfaction, but in a lot of cases you're not going to care about all three every time you build a list. Most of the time you'll only care about one or maybe two.
You're usually picking it for one, and then sometimes you'll get some benefit out of another.
Yeah.
It's basically never that you're going to use all three.
And it makes it feel less impactful, in my opinion, unless one is truly broken.
It's more difficult to build lists around a subfaction.
Yes. So it's just something I'd like to see in the future when we have like 10th edition ones like this, of if you're not going to have a static ability, at least give the other things.
Yeah.
I know Death Guard players would love that because they get crap all for their subfactions.
Yeah, and it's one of those that, like, I think Grey Knights are decent where they're at, but there are some other ones that, like you said, could definitely use the extras.
Even if you're decent where you are, I still think it could bring it home. Like an almost there subfaction could be there.
Yeah, it's definitely like the V2 version is going to fix the alpha, beta test things that sort of mostly got there.
Anyway, this tangent aside, let's jump into the actual subfactions.
Okay, starting off, we've got Swordbearers. Their strat is March for Death. It's 2 CP during the shooting. One enemy unit in 12 inches of a Swordbearer Psyker. Until end of phase, add 1 to the hit roll for Swordbearer units' ranged attacks. Their psychic power, Empiric Lodestone, Malediction, Warp Charge 7. Select an enemy unit in 18 inches until the next psychic phase. Each time a friendly Swordbearer's vehicle unit makes a ranged attack, add 1 to the wound roll, and it can be used once per enemy unit per phase. Which is weird, but there's like reasons.
Yeah, it makes sense because you do have the ability to stack the same psychic power when you do your one tide.
The tides of escalation or something like that, but
yep.
It's weird, but it just makes it so you only get to do it once. And then their warlord trait is Rites of Protection. The warlord can attempt the following psychic action: Rites of Protection, Warp Charge 5. Select one friendly Swordbearer vehicle in 12 inches. Until next psychic phase, it gets a 4-up invuln.
So obviously, this is the vehicle subfaction. Like, it's in the lore for this subfaction. They are the guys who have the armory.
Yeah, and it's also like a ranged buff kind of thing of like, okay, you're going to have your vehicles and they're going to shoot better. Yeah.
So my go-to with this is if you want to play your Grey Knight vehicles that are not Dread Knights.
Yes.
And you want them to see play, go with Swordbearers, because you might as well try pushing that direction.
The thing with that is that there is a Dreadnought subfaction.
Yes, that's what I really want to get into when we get there.
So it is one of those words, like, it's not always correct for if you're just playing a vehicle list, but this is the general, yeah. Which is disappointing because, like, Grey Knights don't get the greatest vehicles. Like,
yeah, this is for people who are fans of the Predator or fans of the Land Raider. I'm so sorry if you're a fan of the Land Raider.
yeah.
But if you want to like try to get a couple Predators into play and you're still going to use the core of the list as like some Dread Knights to actually get the job done.
Right.
You might take some switch hitting Dreadnoughts or whatever. Maybe you have one missile launcher Dread who's got like missile launcher and then a gun arm. You've got that for like a backline and you want to bring it out for a change.
I could see that working pretty well. It's definitely a different take on the army, which is nice to have as like a subfaction that's more focused on different aspects of the list.
And that's what I prefer out of my subfactions. If a subfaction isn't the best for like general rules,
Yeah.
I want it to push me in a direction where I go, hey, I've been playing the same competitive subfaction for the last like 5 games. I'm going to play this slant list with this subfaction focused around it and just see how it goes. Like, yeah, it's not going to be as generically good math-wise as doing the best thing, but it'll be okay and it'll be fun and it'll be something different than I can do with my models that I own.
Right.
So I do love when a subfaction looks like this.
I don't like that the psychic power is a warp charge 7.
Yes, it's very limited. So it's Warp Charge 7. Add 1 to wound rolls is good.
It is good, yeah.
But why do they even put the you can only use this once per phase? Because my immediate thought was, oh, I get it. They don't want you stacking up a bunch of plus to wound. But it wouldn't matter because 9th edition caps 1 plus 2 wound anyway. So if you need 2 of these to undo a -1 to wound, why not?
It's also because like you're not just getting it for free. You've used a tides. You've either wasted a ability, a psychic cast to switch, or you started in a fucking useless tides anyways.
I do wonder if this rule is one of those where you see the legacy of where a book was earlier, where it's quite possible that at a point when this was being written, and this is one of those sentences that's just stuck in here from back then, Grey Knights were always able to cast their psychic power infinite times, and then they turned it into one of the tides because they were having balance issues or something in the 11th hour.
Maybe.
And that's the big change is like, oh, that's why this one doesn't want you to stack, because all the rest would have been able to.
Yeah.
But that said, like, who cares? Especially because this is really awkward because, like, half the armies in the game have a transhuman equivalent, which overwrites this. So even if you, like, double, triple stacked into this, you're still getting blown out by a strat.
Yeah. So it's one of those, like, it's not a weak ability. It is actually pretty solid. 18-inch range is decent, and, it's one of those that, like, you target something and they either use a defensive strat or they're probably going to be dead. But it's a warp charge 7. Like, you can fuck that up easily. And it's not that pushed. I don't know. It's fine. Basically.
I'm happy with Swordbearers, just in general. Again, on all of these, there's I wish they could have pushed the theme a little harder, but without a static ability, without a relic, you can only go so far.
Yeah.
And it would have been nice, because on some of them, they have a very strong theme, but they need that, like, here's your actual reason to take it power-wise, even though the theme is there. You need, like, the big oomph piece to make you pick that subfaction. And other ones, you just need to go a little further into the theme, which we'll get to my big example of later.
Yeah, I mean, there is something about, like, if you're up against a lot of enemy players that have, like, one thing that needs to die, Swordbearers is a solid option because, like, the strat and the psychic power are going to help out to kill something, But that's kind of meta-y of, like, choosing your subfaction based on what you're expecting to see, but whatever.
So, second up here is Blades of Victory. Their stratagem is called Radiant Strike. It costs 1 CP in the charge phase. When a Blades of Victory core infantry unit finishes a charge move, select an enemy unit within engagement range of that Blades of Victory unit and roll a d6 for each model in that Blades of Victory unit that is within engagement range of that enemy unit. For each dice result that equals or exceeds the toughness characteristic, it suffers 1 mortal wound. It has a psychic power, Inescapable Pursuit, which is a blessing. Warp Charge 6. If manifested until the start of your next psychic phase, You can reroll charge rolls made for this Psyker's unit. And it's got the Warlord trait of Vanguard Aggression, which is after deployment you can select one friendly Blades of Victory core unit within 9 inches of the Warlord. The Warlord and the selected unit can each make a normal move of up to 6 inches.
I like this.
So this is kind of a bait for me to play a Deep Strike Bomb because of rerolling charges helping, and playing a second slower unit that can get a really good value out of an extra normal move at the start of the game. Like Vanguard of Aggression's Warlord trait is essentially the 6-inch pregame move that's army-wide for Necrons. That is like huge because we're that slow, fat army that hates moving. So it's basically you get an extra turn at the beginning of the game, which is why we always pick it.
Yeah, and that's big for Grey Knights because a lot of the things are slow. But if you need to, we've got some fast things with Interceptors.
Well, yeah, but Interceptors you wouldn't want to use this on because the Interceptors can move themselves up at a good rate. You use this on your Terminator block with your Terminator Warlord who's slow as hell. They move up together.
Yep.
And they get that extra 5 inches of movement, so they move 10 inches on turn 1 instead of 5.
Yeah, which is big.
So the Warlord trait's doing great there. And then for the Psychic Power standpoint, I want to Deep Strike one dirty character that, if we're being honest, is a Dread Knight, we know.
Yes.
You Deep Strike in, you want to do the First to the Fray Warlord trait on that one.
Yep.
You want to use this Psychic Power. You want Tide of Celerity to really guarantee it. And that gets you a way more reliable Deep Strike charge. Because now you only need an 8-inch. You get the free reroll because of the Psychic Power.
Yeah.
And you can minimum roll 3 on each die.
Yeah.
I really like the idea of you always go for an extra Warlord trait. You take Vanguard Aggression on something that's on board, and you're going to take First to the Fray on something that's Deep Strike.
Yep.
And then you're using both your Psychic Power and your Warlord trait to get in there early game to like really tussle on mid.
And the strat is more or less useless.
Yeah. The strat is so many hoops for such a low payoff.
Yeah. I mean, it's only 1 CP, so like there may come a time when it's like, yeah, this is mathematically fine.
Sure, where you're like, if I can value kill this character that my 3 dudes charged into, that, you know, like, go for it.
Yeah, where it's just like, okay, fine. But realistically, it's the strat's a nothing. But the Psychic Power is strong. Like, being able to just reroll your charge rolls is a big deal. And Warp Charge 6 is pretty easy. Like, you could fuck it up. I could definitely. But yeah, you should expect it to go off a reasonable amount of time. And, I mean, as you said, like, anytime you get pregame moves, it's powerful. Like, it's just a powerful effect because it makes it so that you can adjust based on what your opponent has done on their deployment.
Yeah, because you don't have to unga-bunga forward. It can be correct to shift sideways 6 inches to really screw up what they were planning to have happen in a game.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's one of those where it's like, depending on like what the terrain layout or whatever is, you can be like, okay, if they deploy in this area, then I'll have coverage. But if they deploy in this other area, I'll have to move. And like, you just move behind some other buildings. And it's like, cool. Easy mode.
Yes. And like a key example is you deploy on the line knowing you're going to aggression backwards.
Yes.
Your opponent then deploys on the line so that if they go first, they get to get, you know, an advance and charge unit right into your line.
Yep.
And then you lose the roll off and you go, cool, pregame move. I'm going to go back behind this building here. And now that unit that you were planning to deal like a turn 1 big blow with is now just dicks out in the middle of the battlefield.
Exactly. Yeah. And just plays like that are very powerful. And for a Warlord trait, it's worth it. Like, I like Blades of Victory. I like what it's trying to do. But, you know, it's not generically the most optimal in my opinion.
No, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
If I can see a reason I want to play the Subfaction, it doesn't have to be my go-to. It just has to be one where I see the game plan. I know I can build a list around the Subfaction at least once in a while.
Yes.
If it's not your favorite, it's not your favorite. But maybe it's someone's favorite and it's their go-to. So these ones don't bother me too much. Here's one that I'm not a big fan of.
Okay, we can go next into Wardmakers. Their strat is Masters of the Word is 1 CP, use the stratagem in your command phase. Select 1 Wardmakers character unit from your army. Select 1 psychic power from the Dominus discipline that model does not know to replace one of the psychic powers that it does.
I just want everyone to know Eric got that in one take.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't 30.
The patrons will have a wonderful bonus content today.
Their psychic power is Projection of Purity, which is Malediction, Warp Charge 6. If manifested, select 1 enemy unit within 12 inches of the Psyker. Until the start of your next psychic phase, that unit is not affected by the aura abilities of models from its own army. And the Warlord trait, Lore Master, is each time a psychic test is taken for this Warlord, if the result of that test was an unmodified result of 8+, and it was greater than or equal to the power's warp charge value, your opponent cannot attempt to deny that power. I don't like it. It's just boring.
It is very boring. It's the same problem I have with it of this is clearly supposed to be the psychic control subfaction.
Right.
Like, everything about it is named that way. It plays that way. Like, when you read through the abilities together, you get the point of it.
Yeah, it makes sense where it's like, okay, I need to switch out my psychic powers to something else for this setup because it's going to be better. Cool. That's a nice strat for 1 CP, I guess. And then, like, the psychic power is to turn off auras. That's powerful. And the Warlord trait is like, hey, you can't deny. The problem is that that's not how that actually all works.
The Lore Master is the worst part of this, in my opinion, which I know some people are a fan of this. But here's the problem. Lore Master does nothing if your opponent can't deny anyway.
Right.
This is only making it harder to deny.
Yep.
So if your opponent's not on a deny army, this Warlord trait is an absolute waste.
Yep.
If your opponent is on a deny army, this only triggers on an unmodified result of 8+.
So they'd already have to beat an 8+.
Like, we're to the point where it's unlikely they're going to deny it, and this just goes, now the chance is 0. So now you can save that deny for when I roll a 5 on my smite.
Exactly.
If this Warlord trait gave something innate, like Ahriman has the always rerolls, and there's several examples of this in Thousand Suns, which in my opinion, I like the Thousand Suns book better. I do play Thousand Suns, so I'm biased, but I think this is lacking a universal appeal in the Warlord trait.
Yeah.
I'd go as far as to say this could be the +1 to cast Warlord trait too.
That would make sense to me, because it's one of those that, like, it would make it easier to cast, but at the same time, like, the no denies, you'd still have to roll high. Like, unmodified roll type thing.
Yeah.
Is going to make it so, okay, I did so great, you just can't. But all the other times, I still get +1. That would be worth it to me.
Yeah. Or just make it so that that character doesn't have to use reroll CP.
Something like that.
Now you're paying a Warlord trait up front, and it's basically saying, I don't have to pay rerolls on this character, and also now I essentially get, more rerolls because this character gets them for free, and I can use them on other characters.
Yeah, it's just one of those that, like, on its own, it's just so unlikely to matter that I don't particularly think it's useful.
And I get the control aspect between the psychic power, like turning off auras, very strong situationally, but again, situational.
And there's so many things that aren't actually auras.
That's not the problem with this book. That's the problem with newer codices just deciding that we're not doing auras anymore. We're doing it's an aura, but it's immune to aura effects. That's a different problem. I won't blame this book on that.
But it does make it that much worse.
Yes.
And it's one of those, like, that's kind of why we're here for this subfaction, is the psychic power. Because, like, we've talked about the Warlord trait just really isn't there. And the strat is fine.
I think the strat's just kind of wasted on you. It's like it was written for Thousand Suns.
It's fine.
Where, like, you have, 6 spells in that discipline?
Yes.
See, if this was Thousand Suns, it would just say, well, I mean, we have this. It's just pay a CP, swap spell. And, like, we have 18. Like, this is the, I don't know how much use you're going to get out of this, especially with the list that I came up with it for this, because, here's my deal. Wardmakers is the named character subfaction. Voldus is here and Stern is here, but Stern sucks, so I'm going to ignore him. You want to play Voldus. Voldus is cool, I get it.
Sure.
Neat story character, badass, big named character guy. You can play him and Drago, and you just have to play Wardmakers.
Yeah.
You want to make Voldus your warlord, he has to have lore master, which is already, as we said, kind of meh.
Yeah.
And then, like, you're stuck in this subfaction that's like, okay, so I'm going heavy on double casting character psychers if I'm going the route that I'm thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like, we really want to control the psychic phase. That's why we're in this thematically.
Yeah.
If you're doing that, you don't need to be switching out your spell, because you have everything covered across the board.
Yep.
And nothing else is helping you. Like,
that's honestly, that's why like the strat is disappointing, is because like you said, there's only 6. And honestly, when you make the choices of what you want on that, you're doing it for like the army wide kind of thing. And like, I guess maybe it makes a little bit more sense like turn 4 when you're like, oh no, the unit that I had that had warp shaping died. So I need to, but like, just accept you've lost. If you're in like that kind of situation, yeah, I don't like it.
and if I'm going to play like Mortal Wound output heavy, like I'm playing that type of psychic phase control, I want to go with one of the later subfactions.
Yeah.
So let's move on to a very strong subfaction that I don't like, but I know you just played.
Yeah.
So, Prescient Brethren. This is the most popular subfaction by a rate of 2-1.
It's the generic one.
Yeah. Like, after Rapiers got the much-deserved nerf, because raw, that was silly.
It was written incorrectly. Like, it was obviously written incorrectly.
But with Prescient Brethren being, like, this generically good because of mostly their stratagem, it's kind of just the default subfaction you're going to pick in tournament settings. There's a couple that I would argue, but it's hard to argue against this one. Prescient Brethren starts with the stratagem Foresight, 1 CP, it's why we're here. Use the stratagem in your shooting phase when a Prescient Brethren Psyker from your army is selected to shoot, or in the fight phase when your Prescient Brethren Psyker unit from your army is selected to fight. Until the end of the phase, each time a model in that unit makes an attack, reroll the hit roll of 1 and reroll the wound rolls of 1.
Yeah. Also, funny that you made fun of how I was saying it when you fucking butchered Prescient. Just like,
I can't do it. I can't. There's no saving this. You were misreading it. I can't read this word.
It's just funny.
Psychic Power, Fatal Precognition. Warp Charge 5. If manifested, select one enemy unit within 12 inches of the Psyker. Until the start of your next Psychic phase, each time that enemy unit makes a normal move, advance, fall back, or makes a charge move, roll a d6. On a 4 to 5, that enemy suffers d3 mortals. On a 6, they suffer 3 mortals. A unit can only be selected by the Psychic Power once per phase because fun is not allowed.
Yeah.
Warlord trait, Divination. If your warlord has this warlord trait, it can attempt to perform the following psychic action. Divination, psychic action, warp charge 6. In your psychic phase, this warlord can attempt to perform the psychic action. If completed, you gain 1 CP straight up. So this is also going to be your CP battery subfaction. Prescient Brethren is kind of written in a different way, but it's a lot like Duplicity is written for Thousand Suns, where all of the good tools is in this one subfaction, so why are you looking elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those, like, the Warlord trait is solid.
The Warlord trait's generically good.
Yeah.
Like, there's very little reason not to pick it up as an extra Warlord trait right now. Changes that you all just saw that we haven't seen yet aside.
There's potentially reasons of, like, you need other things than just, like, a CP engine, but, like, Divination is just solid anyways. But that strat for 1 CP, holy shit, dude.
This is my problem, is this is the lazy pick subfaction.
Yeah.
It is, like, the theme of the subfaction is, it's the typical Thousand Suns just as planned, 10,000 years foresight shit. Like, it's foresight, fatal precog, divination. Everything is about, like, we can see the future.
I've already seen what you've done.
Yeah, all according to Keikaku.
Yes.
So, this basically reads as, lose 2 CP a turn. Always have your best unit in both phases reroll hits and wounds of 1.
Mm-hmm.
And your Warlord trait is giving you the CP to fund your stratagem And the psychic power is just here, man. Like, every once in a while, you'll cast the psychic power because, like, Smite went up too high in Warp Charge, and you're like, this is less reliable Smite, but go for it.
Yeah, but it's like, it's still Warp Charge 5, and like, it's still fine. That's the thing.
Yeah, at a certain point, you run out of Smites.
Yeah, like, it's still a perfectly fine psychic power. And that's honestly where I'm at with this subfaction, is that, like, all three of them are fine, but they don't push me anywhere. It's just like, I have a balanced list I'm bringing to the table.
Yeah.
Okay. Next up, we've got the Preservers. Their strat is Charge of the Ancients, 1 CP. Use a strat before the battle. When you muster your army, select one Preserver's Dreadnought model from your army. That model has a move characteristic of 8 inches. You can reroll charge rolls made for that model. Each time that model fights, if it made a charge move this turn, then until that fight is resolved, add 1 to the damage characteristic of melee weapons that model is equipped with. You can only use the stratagem once unless you are playing an onslaught battle. The psychic power is Aegis Eternal, which is Warp Charge 6. If manifested until the start of your next psychic phase, each time a model in the Psyker's unit would lose a wound, roll a d6. On a 6, the wound is not lost. While the Psyker's unit is within 3 inches of friendly Grey Knight's Apothecary, if the Psyker's unit is infantry, that wound is not lost on a 5+ instead. And the Warlord trait Radiant Exemplar is add 3 inches to the range of this Warlord's aura abilities. Maximum of 12 inches. This is what I was saying, like, when you were like, oh, the vehicle. Well, I mean, if you're going to do like a dreadnought type thing.
Yeah, it was specifically tanks is what I was thinking of with vehicles. You are correct of, at least you see this is supposed to be the dreadnought army.
Yes.
We could get into the whole argument of how this works out.
Because you never actually want more than one. And then, like, it's not really a dreadnought army.
Okay, so I want to start with, I really love this subfaction.
Do you?
I love the idea of what it's doing. You see the book I wrote in the show notes, Eric. I'm trying to love this subfaction. It is very flawed.
Okay.
So let's walk through how it melds.
So, I mean, you're going to be using the strat.
Yes, the strat is why we're here. You didn't pick this knowing you weren't going to use the strat, because the rest ain't the reason you came here.
Yeah, so, I mean, adding the 2 to the move is, like, that's pretty big, and rerolling charges makes that extra movement that much more efficient. And, I mean, yeah, just adding damage is good. But you can only do it to 1, and it's like, it feels like you're trying to turn it into
a Venerable Dread.
Yeah.
Sort of. Because, like, Venerable Dread doesn't get the move, or the reroll, charge, whatever. But
right.
The point is, Venerable Dreads are the formerly strictly better dreads that you got to run in Grey Knights. They have a 6-up Feel No Pain by default, and now they have a downside of they are not your Brotherhood, where normal dreads are your Brotherhood.
Right.
Meaning now they have a downside, they're not strictly better. Previously, I believe they also hit better as well. They do still hit better. Yes. Okay, so they have 2-up, 2-up instead of 3-up, 3-up.
Okay. That sounds about right, yeah.
And that's in exchange for not being part of the Brotherhood now. So you don't always pick them anymore. In reality, if you're being competitive, you're probably not picking either dread, but blah, blah, blah.
You just don't bring a dread, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
But this is a nice little strat to be like, okay, your dreads are Brotherhood, and they're not as bad as, like, they would be. Like, they're up with Venerables.
It moves more like a modern dread does, or like a Forge World dread.
Yeah.
Like, that's what you're doing, is you're moving like a Forge World dread.
Yeah.
And it's a nice upgrade, especially for 1 CP.
Mm-hmm.
My problem is, this is the Dreadnought subfaction. Like, lore-wise, when you read this segment, this is about Dreadnoughts.
Mm-hmm.
I like that the other part of this reminds you, like, if you have an apothecary, your psychic power is not, like, useless. Instead, it makes your psychic power still function the same way, like, kind of better, because your psychic power is give it a 6-up Feel No Pain, which, again, gets into the whole, I feel like it's trying to make you into Venerable Dreads.
It feels very Venerable Dread. And at the same time, like, making your infantries a 5-up.
Yes, because if your infantry is within range of the apothecary's Narthesium.
Sure.
Narthesium, the Heliora.
That's what I go with.
So if you're in range of the Narthesium aura, then you have a 5-up instead of a 6-up Feel No Pains, because the aura provides a 6-up itself.
Yep.
So I like that they wrote that in the psychic power.
Yeah, it kind of feels like they're trying to have like, okay, you've got a dreadnought that's like escorting or leading the charge for your infantry behind.
And your infantry are with their apothecary, and they're coming up as well.
Yeah.
That's the visual you get out of those first two. Now, Warlord trait. Radiant Exemplar. Add 3 inches to the range of the Warlord's aura abilities. Great generic trait. Totally fine. You can put it on a dude's reroll aura, whatever.
Yeah.
You could put it on that apothecary aura and extend your Narthesium range.
Mm-hmm.
There's a problem, though. I was shorthanding how it's written in the psychic power.
Yeah.
It says, while this Psyker's unit is within 3 inches of a friendly Grey Knight's apothecary, if this Psyker's unit is infantry, the wound is not lost on 5-up instead. The problem there is, it would have been shorter to write and more correct rules-wise for it to say, while this unit is being affected by a Grey Knight's apothecary Narthesium aura. Because then, the 3-inch range makes the Narthesium aura bigger.
Yeah.
And it would make the psychic power read the same way because of how the Narthesium aura is worded in Apothecary, where it only affects Grey Knight's infantry units.
Right.
So then your Warlord trait and your psychic power have synergy instead of where they currently are, which is a non-bow. You don't want your Warlord trait on your Apothecary that was just mentioned to you. This is where we get into like the rule design portion, like game design.
It also plays weird because, like, you're trying to push your dreadnought up.
Yep.
But then you have to have your backline close-ish, but not close. Like, there's this weird, like, tug of war of, like, how fast things are going up the board.
Well, you have to remember your dreadnought isn't an infantry, so it doesn't get affected anyway.
Right. But, yeah, you're going to be dragging the rest of the army with it, though. You don't want to have your warlord just fucking around.
Yeah, and my main problem is the non-bow between the psychic power and the warlord trait there. The rewording on the psychic power would make the warlord trait work with it rather than against it, which is how it currently functions.
Yes.
And then you have synergy between those two. Now you have your stratagem that affects dreadnoughts, and you're also the apothecary subfaction as well, which is neat. It's not strictly requiring an apothecary, but you can see how if you were to take one, you could stack things in a beneficial way. But again, you could split up your warlord trait to be on a reroll aura, and the psychic power could be affecting a Grey Knight unit that's not near the 6-up Feel No Pain the apothecary is giving other units, and you're just settling for the 6-up army wide for various units scattered across the board.
Yeah, and I mean, then you've also got the idea of like a tech marine to kind of help out your dreadnought.
This is the warlord trait update that I want to do. So the new books are coming out with like a new wording on these warlord traits where it says add 3 inches to the range of this warlord's abilities and 3 inches to the range of abilities that target a friendly unit or something along those lines. I don't want to open up another very legal book to read it.
Sure.
Chaos Knights just got the reverse one, where it hits both auras and select abilities. Because, like, the big thing that Chaos Knight players pointed out is, like, haha, you can turn off both parts of a Tech Marine or both parts of a Apothecary, because they have 3-inch ranges instead of 6, like most things.
Yeah, right.
So if you would change the Warlord trait to include the selectable part, now it affects the Tech Marines, which works with the Dreadnought portion, and it would affect both halves of an Apothecary's abilities.
And it would just kind of like all meld together in this like nice little package.
Yeah, where instead of like figuring out how you're going to salvage all of these individual items, you're figuring out, oh man, I have all these synergies I could be doing. Where do I want to place it?
Exactly.
And it's just a better feel for very minor updates. Like, none of this is really moving the needle on the power level of this subfaction. It's not going to suddenly overtake Prescient Brethren or Rapiers or anything like that.
You're still bringing a Dreadnought.
Yeah. I will say, I kind of wish thematically that you also had the Dreadnought become a character like in Iron Hands.
That would be cool, yeah.
I'm aware the bodyguard rule makes some people shudder at how that was before. That's mostly been fixed now, so I'm fine with it. And I just think it would be more thematic, because this is supposed to be like, this is the Dreadnought subfaction, so let us have a Dreadnought character in it.
And it does kind of feel like you're upgrading it into a character kind of thing. Like, oh, this is the special one.
Yeah. And then as much as we all know Grey Knights have been forgotten, it would be cool if then you have your name Dreadnought that comes out later on, and now you have a subfaction to tie him to.
Yeah.
But again, I see all the good things that can be happening in the subfaction. I like the idea of the subfaction. If you're only reading italic text on the subfaction, you're like, I'm here for it.
Right.
The rules themselves were the problem here. There are wording issues that take it from a 10 out of 10 design down to like a 4.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope that they continue to update this one and make it into what it can actually be, because that'd be cool.
Yeah. So again, I had a lot to say on that mostly sounded negative, but again, I love the idea.
Moving on to the Rapiers subfaction.
My favorite subfaction, still.
Same. Yeah. Their strat is Deadly Efficacy, which is 1 CP. Use the strat in the fight phase when a Rapier's unit from your army is selected to fight. Until the end of the phase, each time a model in that unit makes a melee attack, an unmodified hit roll of 1 scores an additional hit. Psychic Power, Symphonic Strike, Blessing, Warp Charge 6. If manifested until the start of your next Psychic phase, add 1 to the attack characteristics of the models in the Psyker's unit. And the Warlord trait, Inescapable Wrath. This Warlord is eligible to declare a charge even if they advance to this turn. This is just fun to me. Like, all of it coming together to just adding more hits with your Falchions.
Yes.
Especially because Falchions are, like, not as great with Armor of Contempt now.
So, yeah, they got hit by the Armor of Contempt change, but at the same time, they're so fucking cool.
Yeah.
It's like, this is the efficient, boring subfaction, just like Brethren, but I see the angle you want to go with. You want your weeb interceptor squads and strike marines running across the board.
That would be cool, yeah. Sheer amount of attacks.
Yeah, you want to be Naruto running and hitting 1,000,000 attacks and nothing personnel kidding people.
Yeah.
Everything about this is like, more attacks, exploding attacks, because a lot of attacks, more damage.
And I think that's why I like it more, because, like, while it is kind of generic, it also is pushing list changes. Like, you're going to want the Falchions more because they give more attacks. Like you're actually building list changes around the fact that this is your subfaction.
Yeah, again, it's my favorite because it hits the correct curve of it's actually good.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got a theme to it. Whether or not you follow through with that theme or just play like a hyper-competitive list with this subfaction on, but I could build something with this theme if we were to play and I were to play your army for the day. I can do my stupid Naruto running strike marines all over the place.
Yeah.
And I could have a blast with it.
Yeah, and like all of the things are at like the right cost. Like the strat's only 1 CP. And it's still doing a decent amount if you build around having more chances to get the 6s.
Yes, but it does cap now, which is important. The FAQ caps it because this was dumb.
Yeah. And the Psychic Power Warp Charge 6 is a reasonable option for what it's giving. Like, 1 to the attack characteristics is good, especially when you're using the strat. But at the same time, like, you can miss the Warp Charge 6. So there's a solid balance there to me. And, I mean, the Warlord trait's good.
The Warlord trait, again, feeds into the whole go fast, eat ass aspect.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, honestly, there's not too much with Rapiers. I like it. It's fun. There is a theme to it, but it's a fairly efficient wording. Like, there's not a lot of special fun.
It ain't subtle.
No, you know what you're doing.
All right, so let's go into Exactors here. Exactors has the stratagem Sanctic Guardians, which is 1 CP. Use the stratagem in the heroic intervention step of your opponent's charge phase. Select 1 Exactors unit from your army that is not within engagement range of any enemy units. Until the end of phase, that unit can perform a heroic intervention as if it were a character. It's got the psychic power, Fires of the Covenant, which is Warp Charge 5. If manifested, select 1 enemy unit within engagement range of the Psyker's unit. Roll a d6 for each model in the enemy unit. For each roll of 4 up, the enemy suffers 1 mortal wound. If the Psyker manifesting this power has the Psychic Epitome Warlord trait, the enemy suffers 1 additional mortal wound after all dice rolls are made. That's to stop cheese.
Yeah.
And then Each unit can only be selected for the psychic power once per turn because, again, fun detected, although this one is really strong, so I get it. Then we have the Warlord trait, which is Oath of Witness, which is an aura, and you're never going to use it. It's add 1 to the Warlord's leadership characteristic, and while friendly, Exactors core units within 6 of this Warlord, morale tests taken for that unit are automatically passed in your Grey Knight's army.
That's so fucking useless. Who gives a shit? Holy fuck.
So, this is again where, man, a relic could really smooth this over.
Or just, a Warlord trait that isn't fucking useless.
Yeah.
It's so bad. Holy shit, dude.
Oh man, and on the relic thing, to go backwards, in Preservers, you could have a relic that you can only give to a Dreadnought character.
Yeah.
So that when you use your strat to make a Dreadnought character, which is unique to that subfaction, you get a unique relic that you can only use because you did that. It could combo up.
Yeah, I see what you're doing there.
Sorry, but I just had that thought. Okay, so this subfaction is supposed to be the flavorful way to have an Inquisitor in your list, and these are the guys who deal more with the Inquisition. Don't care.
The strat is fine.
The strat is fine. It's a serviceable strat. It's one of those defensive, you have to remind your opponent, remember I can do this because I don't want you bitching in 5 minutes when I do it.
Yeah, but the psychic power is solid.
So the psychic power, again, roll a d6 for every model in the enemy unit. 4 up, they suffer a mortal wound. So if it is 10 1-wound models, half of them are dying statistically.
Yeah.
That's a lot of damage, as they say.
It's a lot of damage.
So this would be the correct spot to talk about the Super Soaker Psyker, your Super Soaker Librarian. If we want to play a mortal wound spam list, where the psychic phase is all about them mortal wounds, I'm going to pick Exactors.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because while a unit can only be selected once per turn for this, if you've got 3 units that are in engagement range at the start of your turn,
yeah,
you could want to swap over to a different tide and then just blast with Fires of the Covenant in the right matchup.
It is possible. So yeah, the Mortal Wound Librarian is a librarian with the psychic powers Vortex of Doom, Purifying Flame, Smite, and you would get, if you're in Exactors, you would get Fires of Covenant. So you're going to use the Warlord trait Psychic Epitome, which is +1 mortal to all Witchfire psychic powers, and you can use the strat Mental Focus for 1 CP to gain an additional cast, Powerful Adept for 1 CP, which is a 6-inch range increase, and Psychic Channeling for 1 CP, which is you can roll 3, discard 1 for your tests. So basically what you're trying to do is cast a bunch of Witchfire spells to do mortals, and then get an extra mortal on top because of your Warlord trait. Have more casts, the cast range is larger, and you just mortal wound spam. So Vortex of Doom, Witchfire, Warp Charge 7. Select the coast list in 12 inches. It takes 2 D3 mortals, and each enemy unit within 3 of the selected takes a mortal. You can't stack mortals from the Psychic Epitome. The extra ones just take 1. They don't take 2, as much as I want that. The Purifying Flame is a Witchfire, Warp Charge 5. Select the closest in 9 inches. They suffer 3 mortals, and if it's an 11 up, it's a D3 +3. And then you've got the Fires of the Covenant, which is also a Witchfire spell that does the D6 on each enemy model. 4 up, it suffers a mortal, with an additional at the end if you're with the Psychic Epitome. And if you're not using Exactors, this still more or less works. You just use Smite instead of Fires of the Covenant.
Yeah, and Fires of the Covenant you're probably not going to use on the Super Soaker because you deep strike him.
Yeah.
And you just go for Vortex, Purifying Flame, Smite. And then your guys who are already in engagement range can use fires.
Yeah. So, and that's also why you use the Powerful Adept strat to get 6-inch range so that your 9-inch Purifying Flame can actually hit them when you deep strike in. And it gives a lot of mortals real quick. And because you can deep strike them in, so long as you're screening decently, you can put them in the spot that's good.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just works really well. That librarian, the Mortal Wound librarian, doesn't have to be an Exactors. I play it fairly often in anything.
Just about anything, yeah. But Extractors is nice because, like, Fires of the Covenant works great for stragglers.
Yes.
If you've got one last Strike Marine who lived, he still threatens a shitload of damage to your opponent on your turn.
Yeah.
Like, if you're playing against something like Incubi or Witches in Drukhari, a lot of times they get all their value out of get in there, delete a unit, and then get countercharged and deleted.
Mm-hmm.
If they fail to delete you, that one Strike Marine automatically is threatening to delete half of them before we even get to shooting or anything else or combat or whatever.
And that's one of the big things with it is that, like, you get to use this low warp charge psychic power to, you know, figure out, like, how much damage you're actually doing and then plan the rest of your psychic and shooting and charging. And, like, this just does a lot to those types of high count model units. So you can plan the rest of your turn around, oh, I rolled really hot and deleted 3/4 of your unit. Sweet. Kind of thing. It's tough. Like, I like that aspect of Extractors because I like psychic and I love doing mortals.
But the problem with Extractors is, again, you're here for the psychic power, you're never picking this warlord trait, and the strat is only meh.
It's only meh. Like, there's situations that it can be decent, but
Yeah. There's the cute corner case of your strat can lead into the psychic power when your opponent wasn't ready for it.
yeah.
But, like, if they're falling for that,
Yeah.
did you need it?
Right.
So we've got one last one here. Silver Blades. Silver Blades have the stratagem Adaptive Excoriation, which is 1 CP. Use this stratagem in your movement phase. When a Silver Blades core unit from your army falls back, that unit is still eligible to shoot this turn even if it fell back.
I'm glad that you actually, like, wrote it out as excoriation because I've never read it like that. It's always been exfoliation to my mind. And I'm just now realizing that didn't make any sense.
We're adaptively getting some beauty skin. We're going to the spa, boys.
Like, it's always been that in my head, and I'm like, huh, it is excoriation. That makes a lot more sense. Okay. Continue.
The psychic power is Temporal Accuracy. It's got a warp charge 5. If manifested until the start of your next psychic phase, all Stormbolters, Mastercrafted Stormbolters, and relics that replace either of these weapons that models in the Psyker's unit are equipped with are treated as being Pistol 4 weapons with a range characteristic of 12 inches. And a Warlord trait, Martial Perfection, which is at the start of your fight phase, if this Warlord is in engagement range of any enemy units, it can fight first. Each time this Warlord makes a melee attack, you can reroll the hit roll. I do want to point out the stupidity of this name. You're the Silver Blades, and everything about you is about shooting. I guess Martial Perfection allows for melee stuff, but, like, everything else is about shooting.
That is a bit odd. Yeah, that's fair. So this is the one that I don't know how to properly use.
I know how I want to use it. I just don't think it's as good as picking something better.
Right. Like, we don't have great shooting in Grey Knights. We have the Purgation Squad has some options.
Yeah, if I wanted to play Purgation Squads, like, if that's my jam,
yeah,
this is what I would try to make work. Because you can unstick your Purgation Squad. Your non-Purgation Squads have the sweet pistol thing, which is kind of awesome, actually. It does eat up your psychic power.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I do love accenting this with Interceptors. I know they're really good, and, like, you can make anything better with Interceptors right now, but, like, Interceptors really like the stratagem. So the stratagem allows you to fall back your, 14-inch fly?
I think it's 12, but yeah.
12-inch fly, whatever it is. Way too much for me to ever catch up to.
Yeah, they're speedy boys.
So you do your 12-inch fallback, and because of Adaptive Excoriation, you are able to still shoot this turn, which means you can then cast your psychic power that the Interceptors come with, which is called Ethereal Castigation, which is the shoot in the psychic phase, then move again. So you could fall back 24 inches while getting off some fuck you shots.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a 24-inch fallback out of combat while blasting them on the way out, or blasting something else while you're zooming past and Naruto running.
Yeah.
Sorry, definitely teleporting with your teleporter backpacks. Grey Knights are cool, guys.
Naruto running through the air. Yeah, I mean, it's neat. I just don't think, like, even if you're doing that, it just seems like it's a waste. Because you could be doing something else, like choose any of the other subfactions.
Like, not falling out of combat, instead deleting them because you're in Rapiers or Prescient Brethren.
Exactly, yeah. Kind of.
I know, but I'm trying to make this work while ignoring the strictly better math-wise subfactions that are no fun to think about.
Right. I think if you're trying to push, like, purgation squads, that kind of thing with the heavy weapons, okay, I see Silver Blades. I'm here because it's one of those that, like, because they're heavy weapons stuff, you're going to want to fall back and still shoot. And then the temporal accuracy can just kind of help out a little bit, but...
This is, again, where, like, if we could sprinkle something in here power-wise, like, small.
Yeah.
To push for, like, the purgation squads not being so bad for falling back and stuff. Something to let them ignore the movement penalty, or I don't know what.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe it would be the fallback is instead counts as having remained stationary.
That could work, yeah.
Which, again, I know there's some weird rule with that. In some way that doesn't let you do certain things like shoot or do some action. Or I don't remember how it works.
Yeah, there might be something, because, like, I think there is already some stratagem that does something like that for purgation squads. Can't say I use them that often.
I know. They're really cool looking.
They are cool.
Of all the Strike Marines, purgation squads are, like, my favorite thing of, like, those big chonky guns on the little guys.
Yeah.
So, like, you've got your Terminators running around with their hammers or whatever and looking cool. And then your smaller guys are like, I brought the big gun.
Yeah.
And I brought a lot of my friends with big guns.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just one of those that, like, right now, it's in the heavy sport, and it's competing with, like, the Dread Knight. So
that's a problem with Dread Knight that I'm sure, as you all listen to this, I'm sure the Dread Knight problem has been fixed in Grey Knights, and now you want to run other things now, right? The point updates definitely got that correct in one go.
Yeah, definitely.
Actually, I guess 2 goes, because we already had our first attempt and they didn't do it.
They didn't just randomly nerf Paladins. Definitely didn't happen.
It'll be funny if Paladins dropped like 5 fucking points and we're like, oh shit.
Yeah, dude.
Or like, true worst case scenario, they make Dread Knights and Interceptors cheaper. They just fucked it up.
Yeah.
Land Raiders up 40 points, boys.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Have you seen the price of gas?
Oh, fucking hell. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, out of all of these, I use Rapiers the most. It's fairly generic, but it's also kind of fun.
Yeah, whereas, like, I definitely understand why Prescient Brethren is by far the most popular faction. Like, it's just generically good.
It is. Yeah, there's never a situation that, like, it's not good.
I also know that, like, Swordbearers does get some good play.
Yes.
Which, again, Dread Knights are vehicles. But Swordbearers gets good play, and it is good.
It is.
I just wish it wasn't because Dread Knights. And I know Exactors have their fans out there. Shout out to One Last Blade. Call us, baby. I'm up for an episode of One Last Kopesh, too. I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's fair. I love Exactors thematically from, like, what it's trying to do. It's just not quite there for me. I feel like I need something more from the strats to do mortals or something like that.
Again, I feel like more knobs to tweak make subfactions easier to, if not totally balance, at least give arguments for their reason of existence.
Yeah, because it's one of those that, like, instead of it being 1 out of 3, you can get 2 out of 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have your argument for, like, yeah, I know that one's better, but, like, I've got this and this. And you're like, oh, those are pretty good bonuses combined. Okay.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That would be nice to see in the next one. I overall actually like the subfactions in Grey Knights. I think they've done a reasonable job of making them unique.
It is impressive as someone who constantly shits on Imperium.
Right.
I will give you, I understand the 8 Brotherhoods and why each one is different.
Yeah.
And I can do that through the rules, or at least the names of rules at worst, for the vast majority of them, without even having to read the lore section, which I did because I'm a massive nerd.
You are a massive fucking nerd.
I am.
But yeah, that's kind of the thing. It's like you feel like they're separate things. Like they're subfactions that are unique and interesting. And it's a big win for me.
Mm-hmm. All right, that wraps up this discussion, though. So let's get out of here for the week. We've been talking for a while. Hopefully it was edited into something concise for you all.
Sounds good.